Hi, and welcome to another YouTube tutorial video. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be diving into Adobe Illustrator, where I'm going to show you how to create custom charts and graphs, otherwise known as data visualization, inside of the program. One of the most slept on features, and a feature that's not really talked about too much, is that you can create custom charts and graphs as a vector inside of the program. If you're ever working with infographics or you have to break down information and need to display it digitally or visually with a chart, Illustrator can do it all. And I'm going to show you how you can unlock and harness that power today. In addition, you might want to do this because the benefit of having a vector graph or chart is that you can have infinite customizable options when it comes to creating a design for whatever project you're doing, to include infographics or anything of the such. As a matter of fact, I'll take it one step further. If you're ever interested in animating a graph or maybe making a graph for a video, you can easily export and import your vector file from Illustrator to After Effects because they talk to each other very well, and you can easily animate it from there. So many options. Now, of course, you can use options like Excel and PowerPoint to create your graphs and charts, but just know that you are limited with your design and what you can do with it, to include any online tools as well. So, with that being said, are you ready to stay in one program, create these cool charts and graphs with me? Well, let's get to it. We're going to dive right into Adobe Illustrator, and I just want to illustrate the point I was making about having infinite customizable options when it comes to a vector graph. So on screen I have a column chart, very simple, and because vectors, as you know, are just lines and anchor points, you can customize your graph to your design however you see fit. And that's, again, one of the most powerful secrets, and what we're going to do today, because what we're going to do is create a custom chart together. So if you look on my screen, I have a 6-inch by 6-inch artboard, nothing crazy. However you'd like to set up your artboard, that's up to you. Really any size, just don't make it too small. I am working in the CMYK color space, but if you choose to do RGB, that's totally fine. Everything works the same. I'm also in the Essential Classics view. So this is my Essential Classics default view. I have my dual column tools toolbar where I can see all my tools. You might have your single column tool. I like to put it in the double view just so I can see all my tools at a glance. And what we're going to do is we are going to select the chart tool inside of Illustrator. So we have many options for tools here. We're going to select our chart tool, and it's going to be right above the slice tool if you're in the dual column view. And if you long press on your mouse, long left click press, you're going to get that sub menu with all these different charts that you can create inside of the program. How cool is that? Now, for our example today, we are going to create a nice pie graph. A pie graph is one of the most universally recognized data visualization out there and has so many wide variety of applications. But just know in the future, if you're breaking down information into a graph, into a chart, it's important to know that whatever you're trying to display information-wise, chart selection is going to be very important. Like, I wouldn't necessarily use a pie graph to display, say, a trend in time. That would be more or less a use for the line graph. So just know, depending on the type of data will depend on the chart that you choose to effectively and efficiently display that information to your audience. But for our example today, we're going to do a poll of 100 students, and we asked them the question, what is your favorite fruit? And we gave them 5 fruit categories. So we can easily break that down into percentages, so the pie graph would be a superior way to display that information. So let's click on the pie graph tool, and your cursor is going to become a crosshair. And what this crosshair will allow you to do is click, hold, and drag your left mouse click and draw a box. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to make an initial size for our graph. So I want you to draw a box, not too big, not too small. Something like this is fine. Let go of your mouse, and you're going to see 2 things going on. The first thing you're going to notice is in the background we have a 100% pie with 1 slice, and in the foreground we have an Excel-like table with rows and columns. Now what's cool about Illustrator's table is that you can take any data set from like say Excel or Google Sheets, you can copy that data and then just paste it inside here and all the rows and columns will be filled out. So it makes it very versatile if you're trying to create a bunch of charts and you already have the data without having to like manually type in all your data. So that's super cool to know. And you can also resize this table by somewhere in the bounding box, aka the diagonals. You can stretch it out, you can pull it in, you can expand it, contract it. I'm just gonna put enough rows and columns so I can see it, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna manually input some data in together today. We're gonna make an imaginary data set based on the poll. So we're gonna have 5 fruit categories. So let's go ahead and let's type in a fruit name on the top row here. So I'm gonna put in apple. I can hit tab on my keyboard or just click on the other column to select which one to type into. By the way, you can put in any fruit of your liking. This is just for demonstration purposes. Let's say our next fruit category is strawberry. Next fruit category, we'll do banana. Maybe we'll show grapes some love. And then I'll throw in an outlier, a twist. We'll throw in some kiwi. Kiwi, there we go. Now notice I have my categories on the x-axis on the topmost of each column, and that's going to set the categories. And then right underneath on the second row, we're gonna put the data, aka the numeric value of each of these categories. So for apple, we'll say 30% of students liked apples. We'll say 20% like strawberries. Maybe we'll say another 20% liked bananas. Maybe we'll say 15% like grapes and 5% like kiwi. And notice what I'm doing right here. I'm putting my greatest value on the left to my least value on the right here. Because what this is gonna do is it's going to effectively sort this information clockwise when it comes to a pie chart. Now, just a best design practice when you're creating a pie chart, it's always better to work clockwise with the greatest value all the way to the end where it would hit 12 o'clock with the least value. It's just easier to read and absorb, especially if somebody's just looking at it at a glance. But you don't have to do that, it's just a design practice. So, I have my data, I like it. What we're gonna do now is we're going to look at the pie and notice it didn't do anything, because we have to affect to select, or should I say, in our case here, apply to actually make the changes. If you look at the table, you'll notice a little check mark on the upper right. When you click this check, what that's gonna do is it's going to take that data and then split it up accordingly, according to what graph you have selected, in our case, the pie slices. So you can see we have our fruit categories and then the pie slices that correlate with them. And I like it. So we have our initial pie chart right there. I'm just gonna click on the little X right here to close our table for now. And now what I want everyone to do is I want you to select your normal selection tool. The keyboard shortcut command is V, as in victory on your keyboard. If I select this one and I click on my pie chart right here, notice I can move it anywhere I want to on my artboard or beyond. Now, what's interesting about creating a graph or chart inside of Illustrator, it's not a normal path, it's not a normal shape. Let me show you what's going on under the hood. If I select my layers panel and look at the chart I just made and selected right here, you can see that little box indicating that that's the selection. It's a graph. And a graph element is different than basically any other element inside of Illustrator. The reason being is it has its own parameters and its own operations. There's advantages to having a graph element, and there's also disadvantages, and I'm going to show you the reason for both. But just know that this is all one big group. It's all one graph element. And so I'm going to hide my layers panel for now. And the first thing that you might want to do, and this happens all the time, you may need to resize your graph. Maybe it's too big, it's too small. Now, if you look at the actual pie chart that you made, the one on screen here, notice there's no transform box. Even though I'm in the selection tool, if I made a shape, and I'm just going to make a basic rectangle right now, and if I go in my selection tool, I get the bounding box, so aka the little anchors on the outskirts of the shape, so I can transform it as big or small as I want it. But with the selection tool, I don't have that option. That's one of the disadvantages of having a graph element. So in order to resize, I'm going to delete my rectangle. In order to resize my actual graph here, what you need to do is you need to right click it. You need to right click and you need to find the option that says transform. So in this context menu, transform, and you're going to select the one that says scale. So in the sub menu of transform, you click on scale, and that's going to bring up this menu right here. Now by default, whatever size that you initially made, it's going to be 100%. So if you wanted to make it smaller, you would pick a number that's below 100%. If you wanted to make it larger in size, you would put a number that's greater than 100%. Keep in mind, I recommend always keeping it uniform. This way you don't accidentally skew or warp your actual graph itself. So let's make it smaller. So from 100, I want to make it smaller, so I will make it smaller by, say, 30%. So I'll just type in 70. No need to type in the percentage sign. I'll type in 70, I'll click OK, and just like that, we have it shrunk. I'm going to hit Control-Z or Control-Z to undo it. I want to show you the same thing, but this time I'm going to make it larger. So I'm going to go to Transform. I'm going to go to Scale, and that's right-click, Transform, Scale. And now I'm going to, instead of 70, I'm going to do, say, maybe 120, and hit OK. And notice how that made that larger. Pretty cool. I'm just going to Control-Z that, and I'm going to keep it at the original size because I kind of like that size. But just know if you need to make a size or scale scale adjustment, that's the way to do it. Now, we worked with the selection tool. Let's work with my friend, the direct selection tool. So I want you to click on your direct selection tool at the top. It's the one right next to the selection tool to the right. The keyboard shortcut command is A as in apple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect everything. The easiest way to deselect everything in Illustrator is just to click in the gray or click on an empty place on your artboard. And now let's say I want to select just a piece of the pie to maybe emphasize it. Double click. Once I double click, notice that it just selects that one piece of the pie. And then I can adjust this. I can move it. I can adjust an anchor point, double click if I wanted to. I'm just going to move it though. For me, I just Control-Z that, and I'm just going to move it. A lot of pie charts have these like pieces that come out of the pie to show emphasis on something. So I kind of like that. I'm just maybe going to do something like that. But you have infinite customizable move and adjustment options when you take your direct selection tool, you double click, and then it works like any normal shape. Now, inside of the direct selection tool, and it's a tool that's very much slept on, if you long press on your direct selection tool, there's another tool called the group selection tool. And what this allows you to do is select both, basically anything in a group. So let's just select it. Group selection tool. And notice we have this legend right here. Now, each one of these, like say kiwi for instance, kiwi and the slice of pie that actually denotes kiwi right here, that is actually one group inside of this chart element. And the way the group selection tool is, let's say you wanted to color, for instance, the kiwi legend as well as the slice on the pie. With that group selection, you click it once, so click on the kiwi rectangle once, and then you click it again. So 2 clicks. With that group selection tool, what that's going to do is select both the kiwi rectangle and the slice of pie that it correlates with, because that is one group inside of this chart element. So now if you wanted to color it, it would color both of them at the same time. And it saves a lot of workflow processes when you're trying to basically colorize your chart. And speaking of colorizing charts, let's do that now. So I want you to try to create or just pick any color of your choosing for any one of the slices. And right now I have kiwi and the legend kiwi selected. So I'm gonna go look at my toolbar and I'm gonna look at my fill swatch. If I double click this, that's gonna bring up the color pick. And I can pick any color of my choosing, and notice on the preview, it's changing. But once I hit OK, watch what happens. Instantly turns to gray. The reason why it does this is because everything by default is grayscale. The reason why charts and graphs are grayscale by default inside of this program is because one of the most common, most popular colors for a data visualization are shades of gray. Shades of gray allow you to delineate information while putting de-emphasis on certain items. So you can reserve color to pop out, highlight, emphasize something that is important that you want your audience to retain and understand. It's just an industry thing. Grays are very popular in data viz. So by default, it is in grayscale mode. So what we have to do is we have to essentially convert this from grayscale to either RGB or CMYK or HSB. Now there's two ways to do it. There's the easy way and then there's the slightly more difficult way. And we're gonna do the latter first. So in order to make these color, what I want you to do is find your color panel. Now if you're in Essential Classics like I am, your color panel by default will be all the way at the top. It looks like a paint little palette up there. But if you do not have this, what you can do is you can go up to Window and you can find the option that says Color. What that's going to do is it's going to pop up a panel that looks just like this. And here's our grayscale. Notice I don't really have any options. What we have to do is we have to look at the hamburger menu. That's going to be all the way upper right. When I click on this, notice it says grayscale. But I have the option to go to RGB, HSB, CMYK. My recommendation is to work with the gamut space that your document is set up in. Because this document is set up in CMYK, I'm just going to select CMYK, and there is my color options for that color space. And check it out. Because I've already selected a color, that gray represented that color, it just was in grayscale mode. So it instantly changed it to that color that was originally picked. But if I were to just drop or just click any one of these, any one of the spectrum colors in my panel right here, it would change to that color. Also, because we already converted it from grayscale to CMYK, if I go to my fill swatch in my toolbar here, double click, I can pick any color and it will retain that color because it's already converted. So that's probably the more difficult, challenging way in order to make it colorized or allow you to create color inside of your chart. So I want you to take your direct selection tool once again, or you can keep your group selection tool. Let's try to make another category of fruit and the pie slice a different color. So I'm going to choose apple, the most favored fruit that we pulled. I'm going to double click with my group selection tool. It selects them both, or you can just select one. It's up to you. Instead of using our color panel, I'm going to hide this. We're going to use our swatches panel. If you don't have swatches, Window, Swatches. Now by default, Illustrator comes loaded with a bunch of default colors depending on the color space you chose. Because we chose CMYK, at least in this demo I choose CMYK, all of these color swatches are in CMYK. So when I click any one of these with something selected, in our case, the apple, it's going to convert it to the color space CMYK and change it to that color, all in one click. Even if it's not the color you want for your graph, what you can do is pick just any color, then you can go to your fill swatch here to grab your handy dandy color picker, double click, and then you can target the color that you're looking for, or even enter a hexadecimal. And then just click OK, it's going to retain because it converts it to that color space. So that is the easier way to just instantly change it to color from grayscale. Now, once we have all that, I'm just going to make a few more colors for my pie chart, and you can color these however you like. That's up to you. Typically, if you're creating a data visualization, you want a matching color scheme. For this demo, I'm just going to choose just very out there colors, no real color scheme to this one. Yeah, there we go. Now, once you've got your pie chart colored, or maybe you kept it grayscale, that's totally fine. I want you to take the regular selection tool. Regular selection tool, deselect everything by clicking in the gray, and I'm just confirming this because I can move it around. Let's say you want to change the data. This happens a lot. Let's say you need to update the data or something changed where you had to add or subtract some of the data. What you're gonna do is you're gonna right click. When you right click on your graph, instead of going to the transform, how we resized it before, what you're gonna do is find the one that says data. What data will allow you to do when you click it is bring up our original table. And look at that, all of our data is saved. So let's say 40% of students liked apple. I can type in 40, maybe it was only 5% that liked grapes. So I need to make that change. I make the change, I hit accept, the little check mark, upper right, and then boom, just like that, it changed the graph itself. Even though I moved it, I colored it, I moved it, it still changes the parameters of the graph. That is one of the best features of having a graph element in Illustrator. It gives you that live data update. And it can be extremely efficient, especially if data is constantly changing or needs to be updated. So what I'm gonna do now is click on my X. Say you didn't want a pie graph, you wanted a column chart, and you need to change the chart type. Yes, you can create another chart with the chart tool, or let's say you want to take the existing data and just change the chart type itself. There's a way to do that. If you right click on your chart again, right above data in the middle there is type. If you click on type, this window is going to come up. Notice, here are all the charts that we originally had from our tool in the toolbar. You can on the fly change to any type of chart that you want to change it to. So right now, pie chart is highlighted because that's the one that we're using. But let's say I wanted to change it to a column chart, which would work for this example. It's not as good as the pie chart, but it would work. I'm going to change it to column. I'm going to keep my default settings. We'll dive into those in a more advanced tutorial later on. And I'm just going to click on OK. And that's going to change my pie to a column, just like that. Without having to create another one, creating a duplicate, doing any kind of thing, or changing the parameters of the chart itself, it instantly changes it for you. And that's one of the benefits of having a graph element, because you have live chart update as well as live data update. There's also live design update, which we will cover later. So I have my nice column chart now. Now let's say I want to change it back to the pie chart. Well, it's as easy as pie. All I have to do is right click, go up to type, and then choose my pie, click OK, and look at that. It even retained that little move that we had. That's pretty cool. Now let's say you want to make changes that go beyond the scope of a graph element. Say you want to do use like the shape builder tool, you want to use maybe the Pathfinder tool. You can't do as much as you could with like any other shape and piece of text inside of this program because it is a chart element. We need to convert this chart element to essentially shapes and text. The way to do that is to essentially just ungroup it. I'm going to take my normal selection tool, select my graph, I'm going to go up to Object, and I'm going to click on Ungroup, or the shortcut key command is Shift-Control-NG. When I do this, I'm going to get this passive-aggressive message from Adobe Illustrator. The selection contains a graph. After a graph is ungrouped, you will no longer be able to access its graph style, its data, or change its graph designs. This is important. Once you no longer make it a graph, you can't revert. You cannot change it back into a graph element. This pretty much is permanent unless you Control Z a bunch of times or make a duplicate. But once you commit to yes, that means everything about the chart, the live data, everything, turns it into just shapes. And it's shapes that you can do anything with, just like with any other object inside of the program. So before you click yes, make sure you're happy with your chart or graph. You don't need to make any more updates. It's good to go. If that is good to go, I say it's good to go, I'm going to click on yes. I want to show you under the hood what's going on. If I look at my layers panel, notice what it did. It's no longer a graph. We got a bunch of groups now. Now, with all the charts and graphs, you're going to have to ungroup them a couple of times to get their core elements. So I'm going to go back up to Object. I'm going to go to Ungroup. Then I'm going to go to Object again, and I'm going to hit Ungroup again. And that should be enough. Usually it takes about 3 to 4 ungroups per chart. But that did it. And now I have a completely ungrouped chart, which is now just a bunch of shapes. Just a bunch of shapes and text that you can do anything with. Say I needed to use the shape builder tool. Let's say I wanted to cut out another shape from a shape. I can do that now. And unfortunately, when it's in chart mode, you cannot do that. So keep that in mind. Because if I look under the hood, you can see I have all these elements, these paths, aka shapes, and I got a bunch of text as well. And there you have it. You've created successfully your very own chart inside of Illustrator. Now think of all the applications you can use this for. And what's cool about it is that you can work just solo inside of Illustrator to create almost anything that you need to include a data visualization. In a later video tutorial, I'm going to show you the more advanced chart tool options such as custom spacing, custom lines and ticks, even custom scaling when it comes to the actual innards of your chart or graph. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below and I'll answer any questions you may have on this. And I cannot wait to see your designs. Keep motivated, and I will see you in the next one.